So, James, it's Friday, the 11th of June, 2021, and we'll be sat in a hostelry somewhere in the environs of St Albans, and the final concert of the festival will have just finished. We'll have a quiet glass of something, followed by about 4 loud ones. Yeah. And I just wondered, cheers, yes, sorry, cheers, everyone. I just wondered what your hope will be at the end of that period, about what would have been achieved, what would have happened during the week that the festival's taking place.
Well, yeah, won't that be a lovely moment? I think the hope is now where we are now. It seems like a dream, that moment when we can actually be in a venue hearing live music again. I think my hope at the end of that next year will be that it will be able to stay that way pretty much, actually, and that the musicians who have come back from an incredibly stressful's the wrong word, really. I mean, weird, actually. How often do we say strange times at the moment? And I'm hoping that the musicians will feel that that strangeness has happened, and that we can now move towards something that will never be quite the same, but will be the wiser for what's happened. Is that how you feel?
Yeah, a little bit. I mean, I'm also just trying to think back to when we first were talking about the festival and the programme. You know, it was supposed to be in 2020, of course, but you know, why we put on what we put on, what was the raison d'etre behind a lot of the kind of artistic decisions that we made. And I'm just thinking about, one of my hopes is that we'll be buzzing off the back of fabulous performances by all these, you know, top musicians, but equally we'll be kind of buzzing about the other elements of the festival. So the work that we're doing with local primary schools, which the festival will kick off with, the masterclass that's happening at Queenswood School, that Chloe Hanslipp's going to give, but with in cooperation with the Future Talent organisation, and that there would have been a big project of work for people who are living with dementia as well. So I'm kind of hoping that there's this kind of overall buzz of excitement about not only what's been done, what's being performed, but also what's kind of being generated around the festival as well.
Absolutely, yeah. It's so hard to tell, isn't it? I mean, we can only be optimistic about that, and I think I share your general optimism. I think people will need to reach out with with the imagination again. You know, it's not just going to be let's get the practical issues of life up and running again. There's going to be an essential need for the magic of life to return in some way. Yeah, we're finding our way. And I should just aside say we're finding our way with technology as well, aren't we, Tom? Because we have, I hope we are not experiencing, anybody watching this is not experiencing too much lag or blurry stuff and so on. We're just, we've got rather primitive equipment, and we hope at some point that should it be of interest, we may be able to improve our technical apparatus. But I
probably should have said that my real hope for 2021 is that my face and my voice would have
well I mean, look, there's always a possible career as a ventriloquist, I suppose, Tom. For both of us.
Got Laguerre? Oh no, it's
got Laguerre, exactly. Right. Yes. So Tom, I've got a question for you. You see, we're both on, well, you know, of course we're both musicians. I'm a composer, Tom is a conductor, and For me, it's been a moment of a phase of reflection. Composers are sort of somewhat used to sitting behind their desk, quietly getting on with things. Not all. I mean, many composers thrive on the absolute here and now, cut and thrust of what's going on. And in some ways, I do. But that little moment of calm and reflection, that's a sort of common thing for composers. For performers, conductors, of course, the real feedback of live music making is essential. Not to say that there isn't that contemplative side, of course. But how have you coped with the feeling that your normal rhythm of life has changed?
I can't lie, I've kind of hated it. I mean, I understand that there are a lot of people, some of whom I know, sadly, who are going through way worse things. But if I can be selfish for a moment, I think I have realised how much I love music. If I'd forgotten a little bit, but I've realised that for me, it's about interactions between people and things that happen in the moment. And yes, I've been able to invest a little bit in, research and listening and thinking and all those sorts of things. But actually, to not have it happening live in front of me, that's just been it's been really tough. And we're making this recording in June, 2020. I personally, hopefully this isn't a pessimistic prediction, but I'm not expecting to get back into any kind of real live music making for months to come yet, actually.
Well, your recording work, here we are. We don't want to diminish in any way the importance of live music making, but is it possible that recording is going to be something of a lifeline for musicians who, not necessarily financially, because we all know that model is problematic, to say the least, but imaginatively, and from the sense of a musician wanting to feel a purpose and to put things down, to put ideas down and share them still, if conditions don't change in the near future, that will be a lifeline. What are your thoughts on that? The whole recording process and your involvement in that, actually.
Well, it's. I mean, just being pragmatic, it's going to be way easier to get small groups of people together, in big enough venues and do it all safely. I mean, there are things that are questions in my mind, which is how on form will a lot of musicians be? Because for those people, perhaps who've never been a performing musician themselves, it's very much like being an athlete. If you take 2 days off, you can have a rapid
decline,
decline in form,
muscle tone in some way, mental muscle tone,
mental and physical. It's an incredibly physical business if you're an instrumentalist. It really is. You have to be in the physical and the brain and the ear gym a lot. However, and putting the financial aspect to it, sort of.
The financial aspect, of course, is hugely worrying, and it seems trivial to put it to one side, but it's sort of obvious in a way. I mean, it affects all musicians in some way, but the sense of the spirit of the musician and how these times have affected, it's quite interesting, because I mean, I've been thinking about temperaments of musician or any sort of creative, imaginative person. I'd never thought about it quite as much before, but the spectrum of types of people between, let's say, the introspective, inward-looking, and then the most gregarious, high-energy, high-output sort of person you can imagine. Of course, that whole spectrum is vitally important. Is not the right word. It creates the whole human picture. But what I've noticed is that the times we're living in seem to show how this moment is affecting people in slightly different ways. I think all musicians must have this need to retreat, to consider their interpretations, their feeling about what art means to them. And I suppose in one silver lining way, that must be some kind of benefit that people will remember when these times have passed.
I think I mean, of course, but it's important to say for the lucky ones, because for an awful lot of musicians, that won't be the first thought at the moment. They'll be, you know, how on earth am I going to pay my mortgage or my rent next month?
Yeah.
So yeah, but thinking a little bit more optimistically now, and thinking about the music that we'll have heard during the festival next year, I'm going to absolutely, this is a cruel question, what's the one piece of music you're most looking forward to listening to in the Hertfordshire Festival Music 2021?
Oh my goodness. It's a tricky one, really, because of course I'm looking forward to hearing everything in the whole festival, and I wouldn't want any of the other artists. I know, come on, I wouldn't want, I think it's going to be, it's probably the Beethoven Violin Concerto, because I think that there's such a beautiful, serene solace about that work. It shines, it's radiant, it's a very loving piece, and I think that's just what we're going to need. Oh goodness, I mean, but that's, there are all sorts of other things. It's just going to be wonderful to have our contemporary music with Judith Weir's pieces and so on, that are of a different nature, entirely different nature, but so alive and necessary to our times. And we need all these levels and these layers to come back into the fore as soon as possible. How about you? I mean, Tom, what's
I've had time to think about it.
We're not necessarily saying favourites, but things that are going to be significant to you in the programme.
I mean, actually, you kind of stole it a little bit from me with the Beethoven Fiddle Concerto, but I'm going to say, because it's one of my absolute desert island discs, and if I ever need cheering up, I think this one would always work, even on a really, really terrible day, which is the Dvorak Wind Serenade, which would have been in the final concert. And for anyone who might be listening to this who's never heard of it or doesn't know what it's about, it's a wind ensemble, but there's two string instruments involved. There's a cello and a double bass, as well as all the blown instruments, and it's just fantastic on every level. It's exciting, it's tender in the slow movement, it's funny, the tunes are immediate, your foot taps.
There's a generosity of spirit that's what we need. It's funny, I don't know about you, but I've been thinking about Dvorak a lot, and I cannot really think why. But if you were to ask the question, which composers have you been thinking about a lot? Dvorak's one of those that's just been bubbling up in my mind. Has that been the same for you in some way?
Well, I think it's a great game that a friend of ours, a mutual friend of ours, has played many times, which is who would you want to go for a drink with from all the famous composers? And I think Dvorak's possibly number one. I think the best night out I can think of would include him, Haydn, possibly Carl Nielsen as well. I wouldn't be bothered about going for a beer with Beethoven, if you know what I mean. I mean, he's a genius, and I love his music dearly.
Well, there'd be a point in which you wondered whether you'd be best off with one pint or two. There'll be that sort of little moment of transition, I imagine. Who knows? But a fascinating game to play, hopefully. So I think it's been a lovely week hearing from our musicians for the festival next year. They've all given us some delightful little waves from their isolation and so on. And what an optimistic thing to think of what a fantastic festival we'll have next year.
Yeah, absolutely. And we're going to be so happy to have seen them all, of course, and also would have been happy to have worked with our wider team as well, because as people probably know, behind all these festivals is amazing amounts of work going on from our staff and crucially from our volunteers as well, because we have volunteers who run our front of house. We have a board of trustees who do this all just purely for the love of it. So I'm hoping that wherever we land in St Albans on the 11th of June at about 9 o'clock that evening, we'll be joined by our friends from the whole of the HFOM family, basically. So yeah, can't wait. And thanks for listening, everyone.
Yeah, thanks for listening.